Good evening, folks. It's Carl here. I'm starting with Learning Unit 2. This is the second week, according to the poster, that you'd be working on Learning Unit 2. And Learning Unit 2 is supporting social entrepreneurship, where we look at social entrepreneurship as opposed to our normal entrepreneurship, and what the social entrepreneur is trying to achieve is considerably different to what your more traditional entrepreneur would try to achieve. This section of work is quite important to you. Your assignment will be based around social entrepreneurship, the first assignment. So I suggest that you guys have a good look at this chapter and make sure that you understand the details in this chapter. As always, I will give you an overview of the chapter. You need to consider the fact that you're a distance student and that we don't have the time to go through all the material. As always, I'm happy to engage with you via email. You will see my email on the screen. I see somehow Collab has decided to miniaturize what's written there. It looks like the upcoming slides are going to be fine. But for those of you that can't see my email there, it's KAMARAIS. That's KAMARAIS at varsity-college.co.za. Please drop me a line if you want to make any inquiries or you're not sure about something that I've said or explained during tonight's session. The learning outcomes are always very important. You guys need to realize that you are going to be writing a sit-down exam for this subject. And because you are writing a sit-down exam, you need to understand what the learning outcomes are. The learning outcomes are obviously within your module outline, and you must ensure that each one of those outcomes are answerable by you, that you understand what the outcome is about. And please, guys, at a third year level, we need to understand that we need to be able to give a description, but we also need to be able to discuss, give examples, etc., around those the various aspects. So, right, let's get into this. The first learning outcome is describe the role that social entrepreneurs play in society. In other words, what do they do? What is the things that make them important? So, as I said earlier, traditional entrepreneurs have the goal of making money, maximizing the output that they get for the minimum input. This is the economic goal as stated in your first year curriculum. So the social entrepreneur does not measure their performance by the profit they generate. They rather create ventures where they tackle social problems, social issues that are important to the communities that they serve. And this can be at any level, be it local, national, or internationally. And they measure their performance by advancing those social or environmental goals. They are not about the profit. And as we will learn, they do make profits, many of them. It's a question of what they do with the profits and so on. And many of them put the profits in their pocket. There's nothing wrong with that. But all of them have the one thing in common, that whatever they're doing, in whichever manner they act, they're acting in the interest of the greater welfare or of the social issue that they've decided to tackle, or as we'll call it, the wicked problems that they've decided to tackle. Another way of looking at it is that the social entrepreneurs protect the future generations. They have this idea that, which is not a bad idea. As a matter of fact, it's a very good idea, that they are the custodians of Earth as it is, or of the social structure as it currently is, and they're merely a custodian, and they're protecting and looking after this for future generations. Something that's done with empathy, compassion, and commitment by these social entrepreneurs. I mentioned wicked problems, and the first time that I saw this, I wasn't familiar with the term wicked problems. I thought that's a very strange way. You'll see it's one of the learning outcomes is stated as a wicked problem. And I had to go look at what is a wicked problem, because the textbook speaks about it, the module outline speaks about it, and I'm like, not heard this before. It's actually a term that was coined in the 60s, the 1960s, that is. And it refers to problems, probably something we'll call a VUCA problem. And if you don't know VUCA, VUCA, go Google that. Something that we'd probably call something from the VUCA environment today. It's where there's a problem that has contradictory information, where the issues aren't clear, and where people who have conflicting ideas about the problem debate and engage with this problem. Some may not think it's a problem, and others may differ on the possible solutions to the problem. And this is the what's then called a wicked problem, or a wicked issue that needs to be addressed by your social interpreter. So these problems can be varied in scope and in nature, but typically they've been distilled down to a couple of issues: the environment, in other words, what our environment looks like, the degradation of our environment, issues around the changing nature of an environment. If you think about global warming, if you just look in recent times, South Africa's own weather patterns, the amount of floods we've had, and so on. Then poverty, which has for years been an issue. And the problem with poverty is it's not declining, it's growing. Sustainability in not only we tend to think of sustainability as green issues, but sustainability in general, the ability to be able to continue to do what we're doing in the manner that we are doing it currently, without giving up profits, without doing further damage, without increasing poverty, without doing any other damage to our social or physical structure. Equality. Equality has also been an issue for many years. I think equality started really coming to the fore in the 50s and the 60s. And at that point, it was more a racial issue. And we've progressed through the gender issues, the LGBTQ issues, and all the other issues that go with that. And I'm calling them issues not because they are an issue as in it is a problem. I'm calling them issues because we've not resolved them. We've not achieved racial equality. We've not achieved gender, sexuality. Even if one looks at something as simple as giving equal pay for equal work across race, gender, physical ability, etc. We haven't even achieved that, and that's a basic thing that needs to be achieved to have equality. Education, the access to education, the quality of education that people can access to. In South Africa, we've got a great disparity in access to education. If you look at, and I've got to remember from another course that I teach offhand, if we look at racial access to education, 80% of people in tertiary education today are black, and that's great. So now we say, okay, so equality achieved in education is great. The problem is that 80% is only something like 20% of the population that should be able to access tertiary education. Whilst if we look at the white racial group, for example, you have more than 40% of those eligible people in tertiary education. So you need to look at the number, and this issue, the education issue I just raised, also speaks back to the previous point, equality, and many of these things are interlinked with each other. And child mortality is something that in South Africa, thankfully, we don't deal with as high a problem, but our problem is much higher than, for example, Europe or North America. And the rest of Africa actually deals with a very, very high child mortality, a scary amount of child mortality, as a matter of fact. Sanitation, once again, sanitation speaks to many other things, amongst them child mortality. And basic sanitation, having running water, having flushing toilets. You just quickly have to look at the issues around children drowning in pit toilets at schools, just to realize how horrific the situation is. Then we talk terrorism. Terrorism is something that has recently resurfaced. If you look at Boko Haram, for example, in Nigeria, you look at the Horn of Africa and the issues that are going on there, and you even look at the urban terrorism that has occasionally raises head in the West in places like the USA. It is an issue. I think also terrorism is very acutely raised in this textbook because we are working with an American textbook, so we need to understand the context there, but terrorism is a problem. And then obviously health is another issue that we need to look at, and health has an influence on all the other things. Now, these issues are encompassed in something called the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. The SDGs have been developed by the United Nations. They keep moving the target for when, but 2030 is a target at the moment. And the SDGs are important, and you need to go look at exactly what the SDGs are. Excuse me, because those SDGs form part of your assignment and what you've got to do in terms of the solution that you can come up with for your assignment, which we will deal with fully in a future session. I don't have the paper in front of me, but it's on there when we'll have the national prep session. But you will have to address one of the SDGs, select one and address a solution for that SDG in your first assignment. So what it boils down to is these wicked problems pose challenges and opportunities to social entrepreneurs. So when we look at these wicked challenges, social entrepreneurs would look at them and they would say, well, here is a gap, here is something in the market that I can use to establish myself and start my business.